Barbara, we are so happy and so grateful to have this wonderful opportunity to talk with you. And I was reflecting these past days what a journey has been since we discovered your book already more than 2 years ago, I think. And I remember really very clearly, I was looking through the vast ocean of the internet, trying to find books that could fit the idea that Carlos and me had, for a book publisher. And somehow I couldn't find anything that really resonated, with our project. And I remember finding one video that you were talking with Oprah, and I was completely mesmerized, by how you express, your ideas about faith and Christianity and the holy envy. And I was like, wow, I need to discover more. So from being there to here, it's such a jump, and for me, I feel it like it's a miracle, to be able to talk to you face to face and to have the opportunity now to talk more in depth about your ideas is an honor. So from my brother and me, we wanted to thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'm very grateful. Very, very happy to know you both.
Thank you very much. So we found fitting to start this conversation by reading a message that Javier Meloni wrote for you, because for those who don't know, he was the one who wrote the foreword for the Spanish edition of Holy Envy. He's a Jesuit anthropologist and theologian, and he gave actually the first presentation of Holy Envy here in Spain, in Barcelona. That was in December last year, could be? November, that's right. So he wanted to share a message for you for today.
Oh.
I would like to give you my most sincere thanks for having the openness of mind, generosity of heart, and fluency of writing to say with such light and simplicity things that are often very complex, where such openness of mind and generosity of heart are lacking. Books like yours broaden the mystery of God and make us believe more in human beings, poor but graceful creatures of divine inexhaustibility. So here's his message.
He's a genius.
He is truly a genius. But he really loved your book. He tried to express it, and I hope that it reaches you. So, I wanted to start with the first question. We didn't want to lose this opportunity to talk to you more about your personal story, specifically your background and journey in priesthood. Holy Envy is based on those 20 years of experience by teaching the subject of world religions in the same college where you are in right now. But your chapter on priesthood is only mentioned briefly. Most of our Spanish readers don't have access to your previous books yet. Who knows? Where you will develop these topics about priesthood, specifically with your book, Living Church. So we would like to ask you if you could talk to us a little bit more about your current relationship with priesthood and what does that mean to you, so our readers can get to know you better.
Thank you. That was probably not the best title for that book, because my bishop called me and said, "Do you have something to tell me that I don't know?" So it was probably not the best title. I'm still a priest in the Episcopal Church in the U.S. and just celebrated my 40th anniversary. So I haven't quit and I haven't been kicked out. But Leaving Church was a book about becoming disillusioned with the ability of the church as institution to change people's lives. I worked 15 years in congregational ministry, first in a big urban church for 10 years, and then in a small rural church for 5.5 years. And by the end of that time, it felt as if the resources I needed to do my job were being eaten up by the job. So there was a huge conflict between my professional role and my soul. And I fell into sort of a hole of burnout. And then the college that I'm sitting in now decided to have a department of religion and philosophy, and they invited me to come teach. And I was ready to work in a hardware store. I wanted to live in my town, but there were no other jobs for me. There's one Episcopal church in the entire place where I live. So when the college invited me to teach, I embraced that, and it felt like leaving church. But in fact, it was finding a different way to exercise my ministry. And it took me a while to work that out. But that's what that book is about. So I'm still a priest. I'm now retired, both from teaching and from active ministry. But I am still writing and having conversations like these, and very much enjoying supporting the next generation of writers and creative people in all areas. That's one reason I don't mention priesthood much in any of my books, is I want to reach readers to whom that would be a reason not to read it. And I'm even careful about the ways in which I use the word God. And that sounds crazy, but you know as well as I do, the church has deserved some of this over the years. So that's why I don't talk about it much.
I see. I found it really clarifying because you start Holy Envy by also writing church in small letter instead of capital. So I found it also so enlightening, no? It's like a very easy and accessible way of understanding also your position, no? So I think also by what you explain now, we can understand it even better.
Yeah, that's my protest in capital letters. My little protest.
And how is that going so far?
Just fine.
Amazing.
I find many people in churches, have the same discomfort.
Yeah, actually, in some way, your answer is connected to the next question. Because, we Daniel shared a little bit about the story of how we arrived to your book. We were desperately looking for, our publishing house we want it to become very interfaith focused, and we wanted to find people from different religions to speak of their faith, but in a way that creates spaces for conversation and dialogue. So in that sense, we'll talk later. We want to share a little bit about how it was received from our side. But in that sense, we wanted to ask you, who do you think are the readers of Holy Envy, or rather, who do you think benefited from by reading Holy Envy? Because I guess to some extent it is also people who went through the same process. But anyway, we were curious about who are the readers of this book in English particularly.
This was a better title because it's such an unusual title that it brings people to wonder what in the world can be holy about envy. So it was a better title to find new readers, though I've had 4 books like this published by the same publisher. So I do have a small following. I think of myself as a mid-list writer in the United States, which is right where I want to be. I have readers, but I'm not living the life, of the people further up the list. So I've been surprised by the readers I've heard from. One of the most interesting readers was a Muslim who objected strenuously to the title. And he said there is nothing holy about envy, nothing. And because he engaged me so sweetly to tell me my title was terrible, I had to investigate envy in Islam, which is exactly what holy envy does. It leads you to look in another tradition and see what's up, because someone has asked a question I wouldn't have thought of. Because a hero in my tradition, Christer Stendahl, coined the phrase, so it seemed fine to me. But I did look up envy in Islam, and it's a different kind of meaning. It means wishing I could take away your blessing, your gifts from God, and have them for myself. In other words, I want you to have less so I can have more. And I thought, oh, that's terrible. I meant looking over the fence at the neighbors and letting that wake me up to what's in my own yard and how we might lean over the fence and talk to one another. But it was very helpful for him to lead me back into some of the traditional teachings of Islam and agree with him. So I saw him a second time, and he said, I still cannot give my book to your mother, but I've decided I like it. And then I heard from a number of Christians, because they said, you disobeyed the second rule. You compared our worst in Christianity to the best in all the other world religions. So I said, I can only criticize my own. I can't criticize other people's. So that was a good criticism as well, that in many ways, the parts of the book that talk about the wonderful things in Christianity came from other traditions. A Hindu, who loves the Golden Rule and the Great Commandment, and a Buddhist who loves the idea of Mary and her baby, because there's not much like that in Buddhism. So I saw things in my own tradition that are lovely, but it came to me through the eyes of other people who sort of envied it from their side of the fence. So I think you're asking about readers, and then I had lots of people who wrote me and said, thank you so much for giving me permission to investigate and find beautiful things in other traditions, because I've been told that's terrible. I've been told that is deserting my own religion or being unfaithful. So those are the letters I love the most. The emails I love the most were people who had that instinct, but they didn't have a justification for it. They didn't have a book in print they could point to and say, see, I'm not unfaithful. I'm curious and I'm loving of neighbors of all kinds. So those were the best readers I heard from.
That's beautiful. Yeah, we were wondering also if you expected a lot of backlash from Holy Envy, because I guess from leaving church, you kind of expected there will be quite the answer, but did you expect also more backlash from Holy Envy than what you actually received at the end?
I don't know why I don't get hate mail, but that's why I'm not on social media.
Good idea.
So people who reach me, first of all, have to look very hard to find my email address, or they have to write me with a pen and paper. So criticism is slow to reach me. But you made a good point, which is leaving church, that title alienated the people who were going to leave left then. So I don't think I get many readers now who are offended. They either turn to the back of the book or they read a prologue like the one that Javier Maloney wrote, and that draws them in. So I just don't get hate mail, and I will never have a social media account because I have is thin skin a saying where you are? I'm just too easily wounded. So it's better if I just live in my little cocoon and read slow mail that arrives very slowly.
Wise choice. We wish we could do that, to don't have social media.
You cannot. It's one of the privileges of white hair. You cannot. You have to stay on, but I don't.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to share with, I think, I don't know if we shared this with you, but thinking about the kind of readers that have really, that told us like face to face because they were in the book presentations, right? We have on one side this kind of reader you mentioned, like Christians who needed like this somebody to open the door in order to find their path. There is also another kind of reader which approached us is people who were raised Christian, or maybe they were committed to Christianity, but at some point they just cut their relationship, and that kind of reader particularly shared with us that it is a healing experience to read this book, because it's really like going to some of the most, I don't know how freely I can speak, but let's say some of the most maybe hurting things in the Christian cultural context. And I think, well, I don't want to split too much, but
I want you to speak. Keep going.
Okay.
Spanish
read.
Spill the beans.
Yeah. Love to hear more about the responses you received.
Yeah. So, well, one of the things that amazed us is that in a certain way we were not that confident that this book would reach the Spanish audience because of the cultural distance to some extent, because we are more culturally, we are more Catholic, and US is anyway, it's more diverse to us in a certain way. But I think there is some kind of common Christian crisis, we could say. And in that sense, like the things that hurt people are kind of common. Yeah. So one of the things, and I'm going to skip a little bit through the book, but I think one of the things that I think it's actually at the core of your book that you're dealing with is the question of proselytism. Proselytism. Is that?
That's correct.
That's correct.
Or
Yeah.
evangelism.
Yeah.
Because in this country,
evangelism.
sometimes.
Yeah. And I think that your book, it is a story of a spiritual journey in one way, but in another way, I think it is also the search for a new Christian identity. That it's healing because you give yourself permission to explore what could it mean to be Christian. If to be a Christian does not mean to have this proselytist attitude, let's say. So I was wondering if you, I don't know, what do you think are these explorations leading you to what would it mean for you to be a Christian if it's not the evangelist answer, let's say?
Oh, that's an easy question to answer.
Yeah, okay.
First of all, let me thank you, because I had not until this moment thought of holy envy as an alternative, really, to proselytism. I like that word better because it's got more aggression in it. You know, evangelism is a teaching of Christianity and of Islam and of Buddhism. So it's a teaching, but they're done very differently in those traditions. And the Buddhist places that I took my students, it was very much about what Gandhi called the evangelism of the rose. Here's where we are. You're welcome to come. We have a teaching for our community. You're welcome to overhear. If anything is useful, please embrace it. It's for you. You can have a cup of water from our well, but you don't have to buy the well. You don't have to enter the community of the well. And that was so attractive. It was attractive, so that it was a different kind of evangelism than the evangelism on a church sign where I live that said, accept the bread of life or you are toast. It was a threat, just a terrible threat, you know, to go by a church and it's like, accept Jesus or go to hell. And that's a different kind of evangelism. It's not the only kind that's done. But at this point in my life, especially after visiting the sacred places of Jews and Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists, and to hear what Christian proselytism has done to them and how hurtful that has been, and that was not a major theme for any of them, but I could tell the minute we walked through the door with questions instead of evangelism, they were thrilled. We were interested in them. We didn't think they were empty vessels waiting for us to come fill them with our sacred wisdom. You know, so even the reaction of people saying, you want to come learn about this tradition and you're Christians? That's so unusual. And that alone told me I didn't want to be part of that crowd. You know, the Hindus who said that during their highest holy day, there were Christians in the parking lot handing out pamphlets saying that what they were doing inside was idolatry. What a terrible way to evangelize people. So it is very true, and I never thought of it, that is a strong theme. It's I'm happy to evangelize, but I want it to be the evangelism of the rose. If I can't live a life that leads someone to say, why do you act that way? Or why do you believe that every human being is the image of God? Who taught you that? If I don't do or say anything that asks, you know, leads someone to ask me about my faith, then my Christian identity could use some work. I'm not shining. I'm not smelling like a rose. I'm not attractive. So I think part of it is I don't tag what I do or I say, you know, as Christian. This is Christian only. I'm going to tell you a Christian thing. I just say, I'm going to tell you a life-giving thing. I see this in the teaching of Jesus. I'm going to tell you a life-giving thing. I'm going to tell you a healing thing. I'm going to tell you something that might feed you. And I'm not going to tag it, with my trademark, with an agenda. So my main rule of evangelism is evangelize to your heart's content as long as you are willing to be evangelized by the person you're talking to. That's the golden rule. Do unto others. So don't ask someone to sit and listen to you if you're not willing to give them the same airtime to try to convince you. So that's fair.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm.
Yeah, a lot of process. Like my mind is also racing a bit, but no, it's beautiful what you said. Well, as you know, actually, one of those persons was our auntie, right, who was speaking in the Xavier Melonia. She was like, "Wow, how," she was sharing also with us, like how healing was for me to read this book, no, because she's also in that process of coming back home, no, to Christianity, no, and she was like so moved, no, like this book allowed me, no, to acknowledge all my journey to go back home, no, and don't feel guilty about it, no. So she was like, so she would love to meet you.
I would love to meet her.
Yes, of course. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Following up also this question, we have one question coming from Alicia Guidonet, who is the director of an education interreligious space in Barcelona called Migra Studium, where the holy event was the whole event. Why not? The Holy Envy book presentation was held in past November, and she sent us this question for you. On a personal level and experience, in which interfaith space do you place yourself? Some Spanish authors talk about bilingual religiosity or multiple religious identities. Have you ever felt so close to another religion or spirituality to even feel a bilingualism or shared identity?
I love the question. And it's much more relevant, I think, to people of the younger generation, because many of them claim multiple religious identities. And, the word for that, the negative word for that forever, well, still is syncretism, blending of faiths. And I love to ask people things like, well, do you celebrate Halloween, or do you put up a Christmas tree? I ask leading questions to convince them they too are syncretists, in ways that they wouldn't call that. They would call it taking beautiful things. But Christmas trees are pagan, and to celebrate Halloween is Celtic. So they're already blending Druidic Celtic. So there is that. But to answer her question directly, many Christians, and I think Jews as well, are attracted to Buddhism because it's almost yin yang. It's almost a perfect fit for Christianity. What really draws me to it, and it is a holy envy, because it like your auntie, it brings me back home to look for the things I admire in Buddhism and see if they're in my own tradition. But for instance, what I was talking about a moment ago, the way of invitation instead of threat is lovely. If anything here is useful to you, please help yourself. The generosity of the invitation, I envy that. I envy the idea that the Buddha is not a divinity, but an example of what is possible for a human being. And there are different schools of Buddhism, of course, some who elevate the Buddha as high as the Christ. So I'm only speaking from the most basic teachings that say, look at the Buddha, but he cannot save you. He can give you an example. He can show you a way to walk, but he cannot do it for you. He will invite you to this path, but it's up to you to walk it. And then I look at my tradition, where the majority teaching is he will do it for you. Whatever you have done wrong, he'll take it away. And whatever you've done right, you will be rewarded for. But someone else, the mediator, is in there doing my work for me. And that's only one way of interpreting Christian teaching. When I take the Buddhist way back into my way, I pay more attention to the religion of Jesus than the religion about Jesus. And that brings me into how he lived his life and what he said while he was alive and what people said about him and how they responded to him, according to the gospel writers, instead of the religion about Jesus, which frankly Paul invented, or it was invented from his letters after his death by someone who had never met him in the flesh. I'm saying very controversial things here, but it helped me greatly to go home to my own tradition and realize there was another way to see the teachings. And the last thing I would say here, this is very controversial. No, this isn't the last thing, is I think I'm becoming a Christo-pagan there. That will alienate everybody. But the next book I'm writing on makes much of the God who is in all things. Not contained in all things, not only in all things, but the God who is in every living thing. And not only in the human beings, at the top of the pyramid, and not only up in the sky. So that's a pagan sort of teaching, which only means a country person, and I'm a country person now. So I'm very taken with the way divinity is channeled to me through the thunderstorm and through the mother birds who are nesting right now and taking care of their babies. And I can find all this in Scripture. So I'm on good footing with the fundamentalist Christians who want me to have a Bible in this hand. I can do it. I can find the places where this is held up as God's presence. So my friend Laurie Patton, who is the president of Middlebury College and a Hindu scholar who converted to Orthodox Judaism, I think that's right, Laurie, if you ever hear this. But she said everyone needs to know another religion to keep them honest about their own, because the other religion will ask things of your religion that you need to think about and ponder, contemplate, to use a popular word. So I have taken that as a kind of golden rule for me from Laurie Patton, to have other religions that keep me honest in mine.
Wow.
Yeah, in fact, it's an. I was thinking what a deep connection, because just a week ago we were having the book presentation in Madrid with Pablo Dors, and he said that he did not know a way himself to be a Christian that was not interreligious. And it's very well. One of the he said many things. One is that he feels very like he found a sister in your by reading your book. Like, oh, there are people like have thought and have gone through what I've gone through, and it's also connected because he went to Buddhism, and it's true. Like, I think one of the things he said too is that Christianity is imbued by doctrine and ideas or beliefs, while Buddhism is pretty much on the other side of the spectrum. Like, it's about practice, it's about how you live.
Yeah.
And actually he is sending you a question for this occasion too.
Oh, no.
So, and yeah, Pablo Dors is very well known in the Spanish-speaking world for having written an essay on meditation, but also I think how we have seen his evolution. He also, after years of practice in meditation, and this he shared with us during the presentation, after many years of practice in the meditation, he also felt compelled to also come back to his own roots. So he's sending you this question. So, Eastern religions speak essentially of personal transformation in order to encounter God, or rather with the divine, while monotheistic religions, on the other hand, prefer to speak of salvation, since the human being cannot by himself reach enlightenment without grace. In your opinion, how to combine both proposals?
I would love to say, please answer that for me, and that would be good. But I I love the question. I live in a very Protestant part of the United States, which means Scripture is very important, and you can't say anything without Scripture to support it. So the lovely thing about his question is I think both are present in the sacred Scriptures of Christianity. In the Sermon on the Mount, that is entirely a speech about practice. There is nothing in that about belief or doctrine. It's about how you live. And that's the central preaching of Jesus. So there is a strong argument for the importance of practice in Christian tradition. Then I go to the Gospel. I don't even have to go to the Gospel of John. I'll stay in Matthew and tell the story of the paralytic who was lowered down through the roof by his friends because he could not help himself. And so entirely by the grace of the love of his friends, the grace of Jesus, and the grace of the healing God, he was made well in that story, though he could not lift a finger for himself. So, with those examples and many more, I think both of the poles that Pablo de Ors mentions are present. And it's a matter of recovering sometimes what I call the solar theme, the bright, shiny solar theme that gets all the attention, and the lunar theme, that comes in like a half moon sometimes. But they're both there. And it seems to me we would all be more full human beings if we could get our arms around the breadth of our traditions instead of focusing on a single verse. I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but by me. Why is that the verse, that is emphasized? Or in the same gospel, that was John's gospel, back up a few chapters, and Jesus says, he who believes in me believes not in me, but in him who sent me. That's very different. And that's just 2 chapters apart in the Gospel of John. But why do we favor the one verse over the other verse? My argument is because it privileges my position. I choose the verse that makes me right. And I see and read, but I don't give the same priority to the verses that open this teaching, this tradition to other people. Someone said Christianity is the way that is open to all ways. And I love that idea. I don't know that I prove that, but in the life of Jesus seems like it. He interacted with Sumerians and Syrophoenicians, Greeks, Romans. He interacted with other Jews from different strands of his own tradition. There were even some good centurions in there that he had relationships with. So it seems possible based on his life that the path he followed was a way open to all paths. If that's controversial, good. It'd be fun to talk about. And I love a respectful argument. I love like the Muslim man who objected so strenuously to my title. That was a good argument. Very good. So I think that's an answer to his question, that what Holy Envy does is bring me back to my own tradition to look for both of those. And with meditation, I think I mentioned to the two of you that in this country, a tradition of centering prayer, that's the name that was given to someone who had meditated for quite a while and found that extremely life-giving, helpful, but had to give it a kind of Christian name so that it was okay for Christians to do. And it has more content than Buddhist meditation. But it's in the, he brought it into the Christian tradition and sort of baptized it. So I find many people, meditation has come up several times in this conversation, hasn't it?
Yes.
And I think it is a form of prayer that has been ignored over vocal spoken prayer.
Yeah, Pablo Dors also in the presentation and throughout his bibliography, he was sharing about the contemplative tradition of Christianity, that it has been there for centuries, but to bring that back, and also to put it in that shared space of meditation that also brought him a lot of peace, and comfort, like, hey, I'm not doing anything strange. Actually, it has been in the Christian tradition for a long time.
It has. And it's a wonderful meeting place. Thomas Merton and the Dalai Lama brought together Buddhist monks and Christian monks, and it was in the contemplative space without words, that great things happened.
Love it. So I'm going to read the next two questions that we have, I think, no?
Go for it.
The challenges, yeah, I think. Yeah. We are stealing each other's questions at this point, so we just go for it. So actually, these two next questions, they are connected to each other, and they are from readers that have been asked from social media. Here we are. The first one is, what do you think are the great challenges of different religions in relation to interfaith dialogue? And the second one, which is also related, is, how do you envision a society where these referred values, holy envy and such, would impact and become a reality in a big scale? That is, where do you see the social repercussions in a world that will live up to these standards and experiences you so beautifully propose?
See, those are huge questions, right? And if I had been born a prophet, or someone who could see into the future, or a brilliant futurist, I would answer those. But holy envy is set in a classroom of 20 students in a tiny rural part of the southern United States. I kept it very small on purpose because I wanted to speak about what I felt I had some authority in. And it was one classroom of 20 students in a small area of the southern United States. So I cannot answer huge questions. I love to read people who do. I love to hear from futurists about the future of this, the future of society, the huge challenges. And with that disclaimer, I'll give it a shot. But I just want to say that's not my call. My call is small. I'm a miniaturist. Good luck with the subtitles on that. But I'm a miniaturist. And I focus on the particular, and I hope that will give people a way to talk about the universal. But I don't talk about the universal very much. So I think the challenges, and I think I can only talk about Christianity, although we've tagged evangelism, I think, as a challenge for any tradition that has that as part of its teaching. And frankly, almost every human personality has that as part of their makeup, to convince other people they know the right way. So there are religions in which that is embedded, and that will always be a challenge, I think, to interfaith relationship. But I also see challenges within the traditions. I don't know how we ever pursue or succeed at interfaith relationships if our intra-faith relationships are a mess. There are Christians who can't take communion together. There are Christians who don't believe each other are Christian. There are Christians who use words like pagan and heretic and infidel and heathen, for each other within the same tradition. So it seems to me it's a huge challenge to get one's own house in order, before you invite other people into your house. Wouldn't it be interesting if we said, no rule for evangelizing others until you've worked it all out, you Christians? And the Catholics and the Orthodox and the Protestants have all shaked hands and said, we believe in one God. I hope I live long enough. I won't. Okay, so that's a challenge. No peacemaking outside the tradition if there's not peacemaking inside the tradition. And I call that and theological humility seems like a huge challenge. How do you hold something dear and say that it gives you life and it is the way you have chosen to live your life, and have theological humility about that? And find someone in other traditions. And I love people on the edge, of their traditions, because that's most of the people I meet. For anybody embedded in a religion, a tradition, especially an historical one, to want to talk to people of other faiths, that's a small group, or it has been. It's getting wider, as you said, and people like you are widening it. But theological humility seems to me hugely important. And the very last thing I know from where I live, where there are a lot of monotheistic cooperations, Christians, Jews, and Muslims, who get together to build a house, for a program called Habitat for Humanity, provide housing for people who have no housing. And the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims get together to build the house together. Or people of different faiths in a community get together to clean up their neighborhood, or to go pick up trash out of the river, or to do a volunteer project for the local school of kids. Those kinds of things are interfaith, but they're not about, what do you think about God? And what do you think happens to us after we die? I mean, the hard, unanswerable questions may not be as helpful as a hammer and a nail, or a trash bag sometimes. So I'm a great evangelist for third things. You are Hindu, I'm Christian. What could we go do together to make the world a better place? I'll come to your neighborhood. You come to my neighborhood. What could we do? Can you bring some friends? I can bring some friends. And that to me is exciting. I get chill bumps when I think about what could happen, if we approached that way of getting to know each other. Let's make the world better in any way we can think of, and let's do it together.
Amen. Amen to that. Yes.
I just wanted to comment on something you said. I think, and that's also one of the reasons we found your book so compelling, is precisely what you were saying, like in the search of depth in your own particular experience, there is something universal. And that, I think, it's an approach that we are thirsting for too, because I think for a long time interfaith language has tended to become more abstract, a little bit like theology, right? Like theology tends to become abstract, but we human beings, we relate through stories, and so I think there is something unanswerable at it, but the story itself, it's an answer, and I think this is leading to the next question.
Yes.
Because we have two last questions. One of them, for me, that has to do with the very amazing ending of the book. I don't know how you feel about it, but for me, I personally found the ending of the book really, in a way, unexpected, but in a way, I could not think what could have been a better end to such a book. So for those of you who have not read it, spoiler alert. So
I come home in a way.
Yeah.
I come home, but in a very different way. So I'm going to be completely honest and tell you, I had no idea how to finish this book. And I'm very suspicious of plans. I've never been able to complete a 5-year plan in my life. You can tell from my career path. I've backed into everything I've done, it seems like. So I have a plan, and then an unexpected door opens. So I didn't know how to end that book. And someone invited me, spoiler alert, to a church for homeless people in downtown Atlanta that was in a city park. And communion was set at a table, card table, little rickety table. And people were gathered all around, and there were skyscrapers, and there were tourists going by. And the person celebrating communion had to yell to be heard. And we were interrupted by a very angry person, who was shouting about God being a fantasy. And the book writes down exactly what she said. Now all I remember is she was mad. And my bishop in the Episcopal Church just stopped the service and said, let her talk. And people in the community started out by telling her to be quiet. And the minute he stopped his sermon right in the middle, one person went over to her and took her by the arm. And it just like the whole mood changed when he didn't fight what was happening, but he went with what was happening. And my heart opened, right along with his. And I know that every Sunday cannot be like that. Every communion service cannot be like that. But it was a phenomenal experience of an open church, open to critics, open to people walking by. No one checked baptismal certificates before they handed out the communion bread and wine. Some of the hands that held out were dirty. You had to decide if you wanted to take the bread from them. There were birds flying overhead. And it was just an amazing experience. So I said, I'll end the book that way. because it seemed to me it was an open ending, that I came, I ended with my own tradition, but in a non-traditional service that, again, opened my heart as I watched it happen around the central ritual of my tradition and saw how rich that tradition can be.
I felt it's almost like a parable. Like, I don't know if that makes, it's like a real life parable. Yeah. Because you really don't, and this has to do with something you really draw on the book, which is Jesus as the master of questions, which I don't think that's possible even to think without some, I don't know. It's like seeing Jesus as a Zen master, kind of like. So he's confronting you with a question, and in confronting you with a question, maybe one day you will find an answer in your reality, not in your head. So
I love that. Yeah. Who is my neighbor? Who is your neighbor?
Yeah.
And in order to find your neighbor, you have to break the walls in a way. And wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
And we will probably cover this, but I also don't want to leave this conversation without, recognizing there are irreconcilable differences between the major traditions of the world, especially between the monotheistic traditions. So none of my pursuit of interfaith relationship has been about trying to erase or ignore those, but it's about acquiring the theological humility to enter into dialogue about those and learn from them and offer my own without an insistence that they, are. And for some people, that's called relativism. I don't think it's relativism. I think it's a recognition of the divinity that is beyond my comprehension and cannot be contained in any tradition. And that when we get to irreconcilable differences, usually what both of our traditions call us to is to be kind to one another, to not annihilate each other. In all these traditions, there's some form of golden rule that says, and at the point of irreconcilable difference, don't destroy each other. Find a way to open if you can. So let's not leave the conversation without saying there will be things on which we will always disagree if we are loyal to central teachings. But I'll tell you, there are other teachings that temper those. So.
Yeah. No, and I think that works so good with the idea of a church without walls, or like a space without walls, because as you mentioned, it's a space for sharing, but you're also being open to attacks, to aggression, so, but that's the only way. If we are not vulnerable to each other, then there will never be what you just said, that finding the middle path.
And it's possible that we're able to do that because then we go back, to familiar places. I think about the comfort sometimes of going into a great cathedral, Santiago de Compostela. I walked there once upon a time, and to walk into that space with confessional booths down both sides with the different languages on them, so that you could speak to a priest in any language, and the huge what was an incense burner overhead for how bad pilgrims smell, waving up there. It was just to go into that very Christian space. That broke me open too. So maybe the open church without walls, churches with walls, maybe it's not either or. That's in my old age. I want so much to resist. This is right, this is wrong. So without walls, with walls, who knows?
Wonderful. So I think we arrived to the last question. Could it be?
Yeah, unless there's something that comes up.
Yeah, let's go. So also this question is related to your last chapter of the book. And I think this question comes from my inner writer in me. So I was curious to ask, because Holy Envy opens with a beautiful epigraph that is a quote from the book, The Conference of Birds, by the 13th century Persian writer and mystic Farid Uddin Attar. But throughout the book, the Conference of Birds it's only mentioned in 3 places very briefly. So first was with the initial quote on the book. The second one on the cover on the American. There it is.
Oh,
there it is. Yes,
kept it?
and we kept it for a very good reason. We wanted to find out, what was also the meaning, And the third one was with this scene in the last chapter of the book, where you are in the church of the common ground, the church with no walls, and suddenly the book finishes, with this flock of birds flying into the horizon, with the it's spreading in different directions under the sunlight, and I was like so also like compelled, and I was like, wow, what Barbara wanted to say with this. It is a beautiful way to begin and end a book, and I would like to ask you if it doesn't take the mysticism and the secrets behind it. Why did you choose the Conference of Birds, this paragraph in concrete, and what is your relationship with this text?
That's a wonderful writerly question, and you noticed. I love it that you noticed. I've ended all of my last 4 books with a bird somehow, and I wear a bird around my neck. The Holy Spirit. That's of the Trinity. This is my one. So you noticed, and I left it just to be noticed and wondered about. And I had the most fun choosing bird silhouettes in the U.S. edition to put over each chapter, different birds to maybe match the content of the title. I got letters from readers saying, identify those birds. Why did you choose them? I said, I forgot, but aren't they beautiful? So I chose Conference of the Birds. I'm not a scholar, but I heard that book, that poem, that whatever that is, it's its own parable. But I heard it mentioned so often in interfaith contexts that I wanted it at the front of the book. And when I look at the valleys that those birds flew through, anyone listening to us can look up the Conference of the Birds and see the valleys they flew through to realize at the end that though they were very different, this is my paraphrase, they came from the same source and were mirrors, embodiments of the same source. So I only knew that idea, and then I just let the images carry it through the rest of the book and just left it as a cipher, which you just noticed. It's just a cipher. And if I'd made much of it, it wouldn't have been nearly as much fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love it.
And your next book is about birds too, right?
Oh, definitely. And trees.
Yeah.
Birds and trees.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up that because you mentioned like you are writing your next book, you wanted to develop more these ideas of Christian paganism, could be.
I'll never say that in the book. I'll never say that.
Not in those words. Okay, let's put that out. But we are looking forward to read that book, and it sounds wonderful. Yeah, like what a blessing, truly, to read your work and to talk to you, Barbara.
Thank you. I'm going to miss you. What am I going to do when this is over? I don't see your faces anymore. You go on to the next project. It has been so wonderful. When I heard you were translating this book into Spanish, that it had any currency, beyond my little part of the United States, or, I was amazed. And then when I read the prologue, and then, the things you've done with it, you introduced me to the most wonderful thinkers and writers. And I count you as what? You're the midwives. Does that word work?
Yeah.
You're the bringers. You're the bringers of this. So I'm so grateful to you. I'll miss you very much. I will. But I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Barbara. And you are more than welcome to come to Spain, please. We will love it. You will eat great food, and we will present you to but really, like all these people will love to meet you face to face and share, a table and share your thoughts. Who knows? So, hey, you're welcome always here.
Thank you so much. And I very much appreciate it. So thank you. Stay in touch. Wave. Just think of me as your auntie across the sea, okay?
Thank you, Barbara.
All right. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Take care.
Thank you, Barbara.